I'm Naomi, 31, female. I live in a quiet city, in a small apartment that's just big enough for me and my overflowing collection of books. For the last 7 years, my life has revolved around my work as a podiatrist and my role at our National Podiatry Association. I wasn't just a member, I was a builder, someone who poured my heart and soul into creating something meaningful for our community. But I learned the hard way that a foundation you build can be demolished in an instant by someone with a different agenda. This is the story of how the new president of our association tried to erase my contributions for her own selfish gain, and how I used the very platform she coveted to expose her. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. My journey with the National Podiatry Association began right after I graduated. I was young, full of ideas, and saw a huge gap in our community outreach. The association was old-fashioned, mostly run by doctors in their late 50s and 60s who were content with the status quo. They had an annual conference, a quarterly newsletter printed on paper, and not much else. I saw an opportunity for modernization, for connection, so I volunteered. My first project was small, launching the association's social media channels. It was a hit, engagement soared. Seeing the success, the board gave me more responsibility. Over the next 7 years, I spearheaded the Next Step initiative. It was my baby. We developed a free public webinar series on foot health, created a mentorship program connecting students with experienced practitioners, and launched a digital journal that became one of the most respected publications in our field. I wasn't just a podiatrist, I was the director of community engagement, a position they created specifically for me. I worked tirelessly, often spending my weekends planning events or editing journal submissions. The initiative became the association's crown jewel. It dramatically increased our membership, attracted lucrative sponsorships, and gave us a modern, forward-thinking reputation. I was proud of what I'd built. My colleague and best friend, Ben Carter, often joked that I was the heart of the association, while the board was just the stern, looking face. Ben and I had gone to school together, and he was my biggest supporter. He ran his own successful practice, but always made time to volunteer for the programs I managed. Everything felt stable, secure, and fulfilling. We were making a real difference. Then came the election. The long-standing president retired, and 2 candidates emerged. One was a respected veteran doctor. The other was Jessica Hayes. Jessica was 45, charismatic, and incredibly ambitious. She owned a chain of high-end podiatry clinics that felt more like spas. Her campaign was all about monetization and modernization, promising to make the association more profitable. She spoke in corporate buzzwords and had a smile that never quite reached her eyes. Many of us, including me, were wary of her aggressive, business-first approach. We felt the association's core mission was education and community, not profit, but her campaign was slick, and she promised financial growth that appealed to many members who owned private practices. To our collective shock, she won the election by a narrow margin. My stomach sank the day they announced the results. I had a terrible feeling that the community I had worked so hard to build was about to be turned into a corporation. I just didn't realize I would be the first asset to be liquidated. The first month under Jessica's presidency was unnervingly quiet. She held a few introductory meetings where she smiled, used words like synergy and optimization, and assured everyone she was there to support our legacy while forging a new path. It was vague and unsettling. She seemed particularly interested in the finances of my Next Step initiative, asking for detailed reports on sponsorship revenue, program costs, and member engagement metrics. I provided everything, assuming she was just getting up to speed. I even felt a flicker of hope that maybe she'd see the value in what we were doing. The betrayal came on a Tuesday afternoon. It wasn't a phone call, a meeting, or even a formal letter. It was an email. The subject line was cold and impersonal, restructuring of community engagement, and my heart hammered against my ribs as I opened it. The email was short, barely 3 paragraphs long, and filled with corporate jargon. It spoke of a strategic pivot and the need for fresh perspectives to maximize growth potential. Then came the final brutal sentence. As a result of this new direction, the position of Director of Community Engagement has been eliminated, effective immediately. We thank you for your contributions and wish you the best in your future endeavors. I stared at the screen, reading the words over and over: eliminated, effective immediately. Just like that, 7 years of my life, my passion project, my foundation. It was all gone. There was no mention of my work, no acknowledgement of the success of the initiative. I was just a line item that had been deleted. My access to the association's internal network was revoked almost instantly. I tried to log into my email archive, and a pop-up simply said, "Access denied." Panic began to bubble in my chest. I immediately called Ben. He was in between patients, but when he heard my voice, he told his receptionist to hold his calls. I read the email to him, my voice trembling. He was silent for a moment, and then he swore, a string of words I'd never heard him use before. "She can't do that, Naomi," he said, his voice tight with anger. "The Next Step initiative is the association's biggest draw. It makes no sense." But it had happened. Later that day, a general email went out to all members from Jessica. It announced a bold new growth strategy, and briefly mentioned the dissolution of the Community Engagement Department to streamline operations. My name wasn't mentioned once. It was as if I had never existed. The humiliation was a physical weight pressing down on me. I felt invisible. That night, I sat in my quiet apartment, surrounded by awards the association had given me for my work, and I felt a cold, hard knot of anger forming in my gut. Jessica Hayes hadn't just fired me. She had tried to erase me, and I was not going to let her get away with it. For 2 days, I did nothing but wallow. I cycled through shock, sadness, and a deep sense of injustice. Ben called every few hours, making sure I was eating and trying to pull me out of my funk. On the 3rd day, he came over with a laptop and 2 large coffees. "Okay," he said, setting everything on my coffee table. "Moping time is over. Something about this is wrong, and we're going to figure out what it is." He was right. Jessica's reasoning, fresh perspectives, was nonsense. The initiative I ran was the most modern and successful part of the association. Eliminating it to maximize growth was like cutting off your star player to improve the team. It was illogical. There had to be another reason, a real reason, and I suspected it had to do with money. "She can't have just deleted everything," I said, my mind starting to clear. "All the files, the sponsorship agreements, the program plans. They have to be on a server somewhere." My main access was gone, but I suddenly remembered something. A few months back, our old IT guy had set up a secondary, cloud-based archive for the journal submissions as a backup. It was a separate system, and I still had the login credentials saved in my personal password manager. My heart started to beat a little faster. It was a long shot, but it was something. I logged in. My access was still active. It seemed Jessica's new IT team had overlooked this small, redundant server. It was mostly filled with academic articles and peer reviews, but there was one folder labeled Sponsorship Proposals Archive. I clicked on it. Inside were dozens of documents from the past 5 years. I started scrolling through, looking for anything recent, and then I saw it. A proposal draft dated just 1 week before I was fired. The file was named Innovate Footwear Synergy Proposal V3. Innovate Footwear was a new, aggressive shoe company known for its flashy marketing and questionable labor practices. I had rejected a sponsorship offer from them 6 months ago because their company values didn't align with our community-focused mission. I had told the previous president as much, and he had agreed, but here was a new proposal, and it was clear from the version number that it had been in the works for a while. I opened the document. It was a multi-year, exclusive sponsorship deal worth a massive amount of money. But the terms were shocking. Innovate Footwear would become the sole sponsor of the annual conference. Their branding would be on all our educational materials, and this was the part that made my blood run cold. The association would be required to actively promote and endorse their products in all our outreach programs. The document even mentioned a re-envisioned outreach program that would focus on product showcases instead of general health education. This was Jessica's new growth strategy. She wasn't streamlining. She was selling us out. She was dismantling my authentic community initiative to replace it with a corporate mouthpiece, and I was the person who would have stood in her way. I had to be removed. Ben looked over my shoulder, his eyes wide. "This is bad, Naomi," he whispered. "This is really, really bad." It was worse than bad. It was unethical, but it was just a draft. I needed more than a proposal. I needed proof. I needed to know who else was involved. And for that, I needed someone on the inside. My first thought was Linda Royce. Linda Royce had been the association's administrator for over 15 years. She was quiet, meticulous, and knew every secret the association had. She saw presidents come and go, and she had a fierce loyalty, not to any single person, but to the integrity of the association itself. Linda had always been kind to me, often helping me navigate the board's bureaucratic red tape. I hoped that loyalty would extend to me now. Ben and I met her for coffee far from the office. She looked worried. I heard what happened, Naomi. She said, her voice low. It was wrong. Everyone knows it. I explained what I had found, the Innovate footwear proposal. Linda's expression tightened. She wasn't surprised. I've seen drafts of that floating around. She admitted. Jessica has been working on it since the day she took office. She brought it with her. This was bigger than I thought. This deal wasn't a new development. It was a premeditated plan. Jessica had run for president with the sole intention of pushing this sponsorship through. Linda, I asked, leaning forward, why? The money is good, but is it worth selling our soul for? Linda sighed, stirring her coffee. There's more. Jessica has a personal connection to Innovate. Before she ran for president, she sold her chain of clinics to a large healthcare conglomerate. That conglomerate's parent company is a major shareholder in Innovate Footwear. Ben let out a low whistle. So she's personally profiting from this deal. It's a massive conflict of interest, Linda confirmed, but she's hidden it well. The ownership structure is a maze of shell corporations. Officially, her name is nowhere near it. Linda explained that Jessica had been moving quickly. She had already signed a letter of intent with Innovate. The final contract was being drafted. All it needed was the board's rubber stamp of approval, which she was planning to get at the next meeting, just before the annual conference. She was presenting it as a financial savior, a deal that would secure the association's future. No one on the board knew about her personal stake. Is there any proof of her connection? I asked. Anything in writing? Linda hesitated. Her official emails are clean. She's too smart for that, but she looked around the coffee shop, making sure no one was listening. She uses a private email account for sensitive business. I saw it once by accident on her screen, and she had to submit a financial disclosure form when she became president. It's supposed to be confidential, but all board documents are stored on the main server. They're just in a restricted folder. A plan began to form in my mind, a risky but powerful idea. Linda, is there any way to access that disclosure form or see the server's financial logs? Linda's eyes widened slightly. Getting into those files would be grounds for immediate termination, she said flatly. But... She added, a tiny smile playing on her lips. The system is scheduled for a full security audit next week. During the audit, the IT consultants require temporary, high-level administrative access to check for vulnerabilities. If a trusted former director, say, someone who knows the old system inside and out, were to volunteer to help me prepare the files for the auditors, certain documents might accidentally become visible. Ben and I looked at each other. This was our chance. Ben and I looked at each other. This was our chance. Linda was giving us a way in. We now had a path to the evidence we needed. Jessica Hayes was trying to turn our community into her personal cash machine, and we were going to find the proof and expose her in the one place she would never expect it. Center stage at her own triumphant conference. The following week was a blur of covert operations. Under the guise of assisting with the security audit, Linda gave me temporary remote access to the association's server. It was a nerve-wracking experience, feeling like a spy in a house I had helped build. Ben sat with me, acting as a second pair of eyes as we carefully navigated the labyrinthine file system. We had one shot at this, and we couldn't leave any tracks. Our first target was Jessica's financial disclosure form. We found it buried in a folder protected by 3 layers of security permissions. When I finally opened the document, my breath caught in my throat. It was a masterpiece of deception. She listed her assets, including the payout from the sale of her clinics, but the buyer was listed simply as a generic holding company. It was a dead end on its own. However, at the bottom of the form was a list of her investment portfolio managers. One name stood out, Blackwood Capital Group. Ben, look up this name. I said, my voice tense. A few minutes of furious typing later, he found it. Blackwood Capital Group was a boutique firm that specialized in managing investments for high-net worth individuals in the healthcare sector. And their list of major corporate partners included the parent company of Innovate Footwear. It wasn't a smoking gun, but it was a direct financial link. Jessica was invested in the very company she was pushing a deal with. Next, we searched for the contract itself. We found the final version in Jessica's private drive. The terms were even worse than the draft. It gave Innovate the power to veto speakers at our conference if they were deemed off-brand. It required us to share our membership data with their marketing department. It was a complete corporate takeover. The final piece of the puzzle came from an unexpected place. Linda, feeling emboldened, decided to check the expense reports. Presidents have a discretionary fund. She told us over a secure chat. Let's see how she's using it. What we found was damning. Jessica had been wined and dined by Innovate executives for months, long before the election. There were receipts from lavish dinners, hotel stays, and even a consulting fee, paid to a company that we quickly discovered was registered to Jessica's husband. She wasn't just lining her pockets for the future. She had already been paid for her loyalty. We now had everything: the conflict of interest, the unethical contract terms, and the proof of collusion. We compiled it all into a single, devastating file: screenshots of the disclosure form, the contract clauses, the expense reports, and a flowchart mapping her financial ties to Innovate. We had the weapon. Now we needed to decide how to use it. The annual conference was in 2 weeks. It was the biggest event of the year, with hundreds of members in attendance. Jessica was scheduled to give the opening keynote address, a speech meant to celebrate her new vision for the association. "That's the place to do it," Ben said, his eyes gleaming with a fierce light. "We can't just leak this to the board. She'll spin it, bury it. We have to show it to everyone all at once." The plan was audacious. Linda, as the administrator, controlled the presentation schedule and the AV equipment. "There's a 15-minute slot right after Jessica's keynote," she said. "It's reserved for a special announcement from the board. It's usually for award presentations. I can put you on the schedule, Naomi. I'll just list you as the presenter for a legacy award, and my name on the schedule, presenting right after her." She wouldn't suspect a thing. I would walk up to the podium, and instead of presenting an award, I would present the truth. The weapon wasn't just the file, it was the stage itself, and I was going to use it to bring her entire house of cards crashing down. The day of the conference arrived with a knot of anxiety tightening in my stomach. The main ballroom was filled with over 500 podiatrists from all over the country. Colleagues and friends waved at me, many expressing their sympathy for what had happened. They had no idea what was coming. Ben sat in the front row, giving me a subtle nod of encouragement. Linda was in the tech booth at the back of the room, a silent guardian of our plan. Jessica Hayes took the stage to polite applause. She looked radiant and powerful in a sharp business suit, a picture of corporate success. Her keynote was exactly what we expected, a slick, polished speech filled with promises of unprecedented financial growth and a bold new era of partnership. She unveiled the association's new partner, Innovate Footwear, to a smattering of enthusiastic claps from those who bought into her vision and confused silence from others. "This partnership," she declared, her voice booming with false sincerity, "is the first step in securing our financial future for generations to come." She ended her speech with a dazzling smile, basking in the applause. Then the announcer's voice came over the speakers, and now, for a special legacy presentation, please welcome to the stage the former Director of Community Engagement, Naomi. A murmur went through the crowd. I saw Jessica's smile falter for just a fraction of a second, a flicker of confusion in her eyes. She thought I was there to tamely accept my fate, perhaps receive a token of appreciation before disappearing forever. She had no idea I was the executioner. I walked onto the stage, my heart pounding, and stood at the podium. I made eye contact with her as she sat in the front row, her polite smile looking strained. "Thank you," I began, my voice clear and steady. "I am here today to talk about legacy. For 7 years, I had the honor of building a legacy of community, education, and integrity within this association." I paused, letting the words hang in the air. Our new president, Jessica Hayes, just spoke about a new legacy, one of partnership and profit, but I believe it's important for all of us to know the true cost of that partnership. From the back of the room, Linda hit the switch. The massive screen behind me, which had been displaying the conference logo, flickered to life. The first slide appeared, a copy of Jessica's financial disclosure form, with the line about Blackwood Capital Group highlighted in red. A gasp rippled through the audience. I saw Jessica's face drain of all color. "This is the confidential financial disclosure form submitted by our president," I said, my voice amplified by the microphone. "And this firm manages her investments." Click. The next slide showed the irrefutable link between Blackwood Capital and Innovate Footwear, the same firm that is a major partner in Innovate Footwear. a clear, undisclosed conflict of interest. Jessica shot up from her seat, sputtering, "This is out of order, security," but no one was listening to her. All eyes were on the screen. Click. The next slide showed the outrageous clauses from the contract, the sharing of member data, the veto power over speakers. Murmurs in the crowd grew into angry whispers. "This isn't a partnership, it's a takeover," I stated calmly, "a deal that benefits one person above all else." Click. The final slides appeared, a montage of the expense reports. The lavish dinners, the hotel stays, and the consulting fee paid to her husband's company, the proof of collusion, the whispers in the room erupted into a roar of outrage. People were on their feet, pointing at Jessica, their faces masks of disbelief and anger. I turned to look directly at her. She was frozen, her face pale with shock and humiliation. The legacy I built was based on trust. I said, my voice ringing with conviction, "You have broken that trust. You used this association for your own personal greed." I looked out at the hundreds of faces staring back at me. "The future of this association is in your hands. Do not let it be sold to the highest bidder." I stepped back from the podium. For a moment, there was stunned silence. Then a single person started to clap. It was an elderly doctor in the second row. Then another joined in, and another. Within seconds, the entire ballroom was on its feet, not for Jessica, but for me. The sound of their applause was deafening, a wave of validation and support that washed over me. It wasn't just applause, it was a verdict. In the chaos, I saw Jessica Hayes, completely exposed, turn and flee the ballroom. The aftermath of my presentation was swift and decisive. The conference was thrown into chaos. An emergency board meeting was called that very afternoon. Faced with irrefutable evidence and the fury of the membership, Jessica Hayes tendered her resignation via email before anyone could officially fire her. She didn't even have the courage to do it in person. The Innovate Footwear deal was immediately terminated, with the board issuing a public apology to the members for the alarming lack of oversight. Within a week, the board offered me my old job back, with a significant raise and an expanded role. They wanted me to not only rebuild the community initiatives, but also to head a new ethics and oversight committee. It was everything I should have wanted. It was vindication. But as I sat with the offer, I realized something had changed within me. The association was my home, but the battle to save it had shown me that my passion wasn't for the organization itself, but for the work, for building community, for educating, for connecting people. I didn't need the association's letterhead to do that. I respectfully declined their offer. Instead, I took a different path. Ben and I, along with a few other forward-thinking colleagues who were inspired by the events at the conference, decided to start our own thing. We launched a new, independent platform for podiatry professionals. It was fully digital, accessible, and dedicated entirely to education and collaboration, free from the corporate interests and old-world politics that had almost corrupted the association. Our new venture was built on the principles I had always championed: transparency, integrity, and community first. We started small, with a webinar series and a collaborative online forum, but the response was overwhelming. Hundreds of members from the old association, disillusioned by the recent scandal, flocked to our platform. They were hungry for a community they could trust. It was more work than I could have ever imagined, but it was the most rewarding work of my life. I was no longer just a director, I was a founder. I wasn't just rebuilding a foundation, I was laying a new one on my own terms. I lost a job that I loved, but in doing so, I found my true purpose. I learned that sometimes the structures we dedicate ourselves to can become prisons. And the only way to truly be free and make a difference is to have the courage to walk away and build something new from the ground up. And this time, it was something that no one could ever take away from me.